In the autumn of 1888, a shadow fell over London. A name was whispered in the gaslit alleys of Whitechapel, a name that would become a legend, totally synonymous with terror and the fog: Jack the Ripper.
You know the image, right? The top-hatted phantom, the surgical genius, the monster who just vanished without a trace. It's a story we all feel like we know, a tale we've heard 100 times.
Because the real story of Jack the Ripper isn't about some supernatural villain. No, it's a story of poverty, of a media frenzy gone wild, and of just catastrophic failure. To really get it, we have to go back to the beginning.
To find the real killer, you first have to understand his world. And believe me, it was not a Gothic movie set. It was a place that people at the time literally called the Abyss.
So, on one side you have the myth, this classy gentleman killer, a character basically created by newspapers and fiction. But the reality? The reality was Whitechapel. Imagine a maze of unlit slums where 80,000 people are crammed together in unbelievable poverty. For the women there, prostitution wasn't some moral failing. It was how you earned the fourpence to get a bed for the night. This was the world that let a killer strike and just melt away in seconds.
We call them the canonical five, but these women were so much more than a list of victims. They were mothers, wives, daughters. They were women like Annie Chapman, a widow selling matches just to get by, or Elizabeth Stride, an immigrant who actually ran her own business at one point. They weren't just numbers in a killer's story. They were people, and they were the real victims of a system that offered them absolutely no safety net.
With the whole city in a full-blown panic, everyone looked to the police. But the hunt for the Ripper, well, it wasn't exactly a story of brilliant deduction. It was more like a masterclass in how not to run an investigation.
2. That's how many different police forces were hunting for the exact same man, and they were rivals. You had the Metropolitan Police, who covered most of London, and the City of London Police, who had the financial district. They didn't share information well, there was professional jealousy, it was just chaos right at the heart of the investigation.
And the chaos didn't stop there. I mean, you have to remember, this was an age before forensic science. Crime scenes were trampled by huge crowds before investigators could even show up. There was no fingerprinting, no DNA, no concept of contamination. The police were basically technologically blind, trying to solve a 20th century crime with 19th century tools.
Then, a possible breakthrough. After one of the murders, this chalk message was found on a wall, right near a piece of the victim's bloodied apron. Was this it? A clue, maybe written by the killer himself?
We'll never know. The police commissioner, a guy named Sir Charles Warren, ordered it washed away before it could even be photographed. Why? He was afraid it would spark anti-Semitic riots in an already tense East End. And the question has haunted this case ever since. Did he prevent a riot, or did he destroy the single best clue the police ever had?
People were so frustrated with the police failures that the citizens of Whitechapel decided to take matters into their own hands. A local builder named George Lusk formed the Vigilance Committee. They organized their own patrols and even offered a reward, a total slap in the face to the official investigation. It was a community fighting back. But honestly, the biggest twist in this entire story wasn't who the killer was. It was how he got his famous name. Because it turns out Jack the Ripper probably never even called himself that.
Okay, so on September 27th, a letter written in red ink shows up at a news agency. It's cocky, it's taunting, and it was signed, for the very first time, Jack the Ripper. And then, when the next victim, Catherine Edowes, was found with a severed earlobe, this letter went from a sick joke to a terrifying prophecy. The name stuck.
Now, contrast that with this. A few weeks later, George Lusk, the guy from the Vigilance Committee, gets a package. Inside, half a human kidney, and this note. It's crude, it's barely literate, and it's absolutely terrifying. Most experts agree this letter is likely the only one that actually came from the killer.
Which brings us to the bombshell. That famous Dear Boss letter, the one that gave the killer his iconic name? Yeah, almost certainly a fake. A brilliant, cynical hoax cooked up by a journalist to keep the story on the front pages and sell more newspapers. The media didn't just report the news, they literally created the legend.
So, if we just ignore all that media hype, who were the police actually looking at? Well, the list of suspects ranges from the pretty plausible to the completely fantastic. The police files really zeroed in on 3 key men.
You had Montague Druitt, a lawyer who killed himself right after the last murder. Then there was George Chapman, a violent poisoner who the lead detective was convinced was the guy. And finally, Aaron Kosminski, a local barber who was mentally ill, hated women, and was apparently identified by a witness.
But none of those guys really captured the public's imagination, not like the most sensational theory of all, the idea that the killer was actually a member of the royal family.
The theory is wild. It says Queen Victoria's own grandson, Prince Albert Victor, was the killer. Or that the royal physician, Sir William Gall, did it to cover up some royal scandal. It's a fantastic story, right? Makes for great movies. The only problem? There's absolutely zero evidence for it. Court records show the prince was miles away from London during the murders, and Sir William Gall was a frail old man who just had a stroke.
So, with no definitive suspect and a trail that's been cold for over 130 years, we're left with the biggest question of all. Why are we still so obsessed with this case?
The killings just escalated with terrifying speed over 10 short weeks, ending with the absolutely brutal murder of Mary Jane Kelly. And then, nothing. Silence. The murders just stopped. This sudden end is maybe the most enduring mystery of all. Did the killer die? Was he locked up for something else? Or did he just vanish back into the London fog?
And the vacuum left behind by the killer's disappearance? It gave birth to this whole phenomenon we now call ripperology. It's this crazy mix of history, amateur detective work, and honestly, you could say this case is patient zero for our entire modern obsession with true crime. This is where it all started.
Look, at the end of the day, we will probably never know who Jack the Ripper was. And it's not because of some grand conspiracy. It's for a much simpler, more frustrating reason. The evidence is gone. It was contaminated, washed away, or never collected in the first place. The answer was lost to history the moment the crimes were committed.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Jack the Ripper has become this timeless bogeyman, a piece of entertainment. But in celebrating the myth of this monster, we have to ask ourselves, have we forgotten the real people whose lives he destroyed? Polly, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Mary Jane. Maybe the real legacy of this case isn't about who he was, but about finally remembering who they were.